I can see our students are all ready because they're all looking forward and quiet. Thank you, fifth graders. What great representatives of our future citizens you are today. Good morning. On behalf of Center Street School and the El Segundo Unified School District, we are so very pleased to welcome you this morning to our candidates forum for City Council of El Segundo. So let's welcome our candidates today. I'm Melissa Moore, I'm the superintendent, and we welcome you to our forum. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to our PTA president here at Center Street, Tracy Miller-Zarnicki, and she will be serving as the facilitator for our event this morning, and this is sponsored by our Center Street PTA. So what a great opportunity for civic engagement for our students to see our citizens of El Segundo coming to be informed on the issues and on the candidates and being responsible citizens. So thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the great turnout. I'm glad Mother Nature agreed and is holding off on the rain for now. I just want to say, also helping with today's forum, and we're grateful that Ms. Monahan let us do this here, so thank you, Ms. Monahan. And we're pleased that we have PTA members from both Center Street and Richmond Street School here to help us run the event. So thank you, volunteers all over the place today. We really appreciate the candidates taking time to be here today to share their views on a number of topics. And we're glad that many of our residents are here and going to be watching from home afterwards. So thank you, El Segundo TV, for covering and sharing this afterwards. We are also pleased that fifth grade is here, and we hope that this is inspiring for you guys. We have a couple questions in the mix from our fifth grade students today. So thank you guys for adding to the mix. Pretty sure there's nothing about Fortnite, though. I'm pretty sure. Sorry, yeah. The legislation committee ruled those out. Just so you know how things work here today, the questions have been submitted in written form by members of the community, including our fifth grade, and then they were vetted and organized by our legislation committee. The flow of answers will be moderated by me, and Ms. Gwen Lipsey here has the timing that we're doing. What we have for each candidate is a 90-second opening statement, 60 seconds for each question, and a 90-second closing statement. They are seated in random order as chosen by one of our first graders this morning. And we'll go up and down the line fairly with all of this. We will have a little stop sign warning at the 15-second mark that Gwen will show them. So they've done this before. You kind of know the drill. So that's how it's going to run. We're grateful to everyone's input on the questions. We'll do our best to get to as many as possible. I promise we try to keep this to about an hour. I expect we'll go a little longer because there's a lot of good stuff to be said here today. But we estimate that if we asked every question that was turned in, it would be a good 3.5 hour forum. So what I will say is if you don't hear your question answered today, go to the next forum or reach out to the lovely candidates personally, because I'm sure they would love to talk to you about what your concerns are. So with that being said, we're going to get started. So we'll start opening statements with Chris Pimentel at this end. So go ahead, Chris, you've got 90 seconds.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Pimentel. I am a Marine officer, a veteran, and an executive here in town. I was born at Castle Air Force Base, which is about 5 hours north of here by Atwater, California. I grew up moving around the country. My father was a B-52 aviator, and as a result of that, I got to see a lot of how different parts of America live and different cultural mores, a lot of which are very, very similar to the way we live in El Segundo. My father retired to Wichita, Kansas, where I went to high school. And in Wichita, I had a formative moment while we were watching the Battle of Mogadishu on the news. And I said to my father, classically, with angst, why won't someone do something? And his response is, do you mean someone else or do you mean you? So from that, there was an impetus in our family to get involved and not look to other people to solve your problems. I went to the University of Virginia on an NROTC scholarship and served in the Marines in reconnaissance and infantry units after that for 8 years. From that, I moved to the Department of Homeland Security, where I managed public and private partnerships, and a thing that tied those two fields together wasn't so much the hard skills, it was the management capability of aggregating specialists and expertise that you do not know necessarily but have broad proficiency with, and using those to implement solutions. In the private sector, I was able to move here to Southern California, where my wife is from. This is the only home that two of my children will ever know. Iris and Mazzy have gone to school here, and my son Dash is over at Richmond, and I hope to earn your votes.
All right, thank you, Chris. All right, next up, Mr. Lance Giroux.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lance Giroux. I have been a resident, a homeowner, and the vice president of sales at a local company here in El Segundo for the past 18 years. My wife Gina and I have 2 children. Our son Luke is a 12-year-old and is at 6th grade at the middle school. My daughter Leah is in 4th grade and is a 4th grader right here at Center Street. I have been the president of the Little League the past 2 years and been on that board for 5 years. I was also the president of the El Segundo Girls Softball League and was on that board for 3, and I'm also a member of Kiwanis currently. So I often get the question, why? Why do you want to do this? And I can kind of sum that up for you in this statement. I fell in love with this place. My wife, our family, made it our home for a couple of main reasons. Great schools, great emergency and public services, and a very close sense of community that I think that we all share and they all fell in love with when we got here. My hope is to be able to preserve and enhance that as we move forward and do that for everyone, from the seniors to the kids to all of us that lie a little bit in between those two groups. So that's really what I hope to accomplish. Again, I thank you for coming out here today or this morning, and I look forward to being able to share some of my insights into the city and the issues that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Next up, Ms. Maria Barden.
Hello, my name is Maria Barden, and this is really ironic because I usually am sitting there and my students were up here and I would watch them, so this is quite interesting. Anyways, I grew up in the South Bay. I lived in El Segundo for 24 years. My children are now in college, but they did attend this school, which I am so grateful for. They went to middle school, they went to high school, and I'm looking forward to them. One is actually graduating this May. My community service here is, I've done the Ed Foundation all throughout my kids' school years here. I've been a participant of the Run for Education for over 10 years. And I'm running for City Council just because I am so blessed to live in a community here that offers so much, and please don't ever take it for granted. Your teachers here and the community are very strong, and you should value what you have here. You don't see this a lot in other communities, so just know that you are special. I want to keep El Segundo safe, so safety is my first priority, and I think especially now with what's going on in the world, it's extremely important to make sure that we have our schools safe, our community safe, and public safety is number 1. I want to thank you again for listening to me. I'm a very good listener. I've listened to all of your needs out there, and I'm knocking on doors. If I haven't knocked on yours, I'm sorry I haven't gotten a hold of you, but I would like to listen to you and help your concerns as much as I can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Maria. And now, Mr. Scott Nickel.
Thank you, Center Street PTA, Tracy, and all of you for making time today. I made the decision to run for City Council because I'm a community-oriented, El Segundo-centric individual. I love El Segundo to a fault, and I have the ability to bring us together as a community. Our town is filled with brilliant individuals. One of my greatest skill sets is being able to identify the strengths in each of us and then utilize those strengths in order to produce the greatest possible results. Many years ago, I came to the realization that I will never be the smartest person in the room, nor the strongest, nor the fastest, and clearly not the tallest. Choosing to surround myself with brilliant individuals and being able to listen to their counsel, it's a personality trait that I am lucky to embody. I have and will continue to encourage all those who love El Segundo to get involved, to volunteer, to share your expertise and your insight in order to ensure that our town, our community, stays a step above the rest. El Segundo. El Segundo is not my town. She's not your town, and she's not your town. She's our town. And our town should be shaped in our image, not mine and not yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. So we'll get started with our questions. Again, we have a 60-second window for the questions, and a 15-second warning will be given. So thank you for your efficient but informative answers in advance. We're going to start with a few questions, sort of to get to know them. Some of them may have said some of these items before, but we welcome them to reiterate them as we ask the first question. We're going to start with Mr. Pimentel at the end here. What experience do you have working with El Segundo city departments or committees? Which ones and for how long? So, Mr. Pimentel.
You know, it's always difficult when you go to a job interview and they start with the question of what's your biggest failure. I have attempted to join several committees over time, and I realize that there's some that I have particular interest in that may not have as much interest in me. Namely, you know, there's things for planning, which I think undergirds, you know, there's an old saying that geography is destiny, right? So buildings and the way we construct them, the way we formulate the city are of interest to me. So I repeatedly would go to those sorts of things and repeatedly be turned away for people with greater subject matter expertise, which is okay. Learning the limitations of what your specific knowledge is an okay thing to have. But from being involved in a process of pursuing those things, it leads to a greater proficiency, so I can be, you know, tactile and ductile with those items without necessarily being a member of or sitting on this, having a seat at those tables.
All right. Mr. Drew?
All right, so as far as city departments, as I mentioned in the beginning, I've been the president of the Little League, and through that, I have had an opportunity to work with a lot of the departments, but not have sat on any of those committees. But I have spoken in front of City Council on a number of occasions, advocating for things like field space for our challenger divisions and for our teams. I have also worked with the planning commissions and the Parks and Rec commissions on the behalf of the league itself. So while I have not been on any of the committees, I did interview for planning commission as well. I think at the same time he did, and we didn't get it. But it's a great committee, and it takes a lot of experience, but I was with you on that. But in general, my city involvement has been very much through the sports aspect of it, and I've had a pretty good amount of time working with individual committees or departments. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barden?
I've volunteered for almost everything that I could. I mean, I still worked full-time, but I made sure that I still kept with volunteering in the community. So one, especially that I was consistent, even though my kids graduated, I always will do as much as I can the Run for Education, because I truly believe that's El Segundo's largest fundraiser. And I think it's really important to be a part of that. As far as soccer, my kids went through soccer. I volunteer, part of the Ed Foundation. I worked at this school. I volunteered at the middle school. I helped at doing the Rexham Park, just wherever I can. So I wasn't officially on any committee. However, I did volunteer as much as I could.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nickel?
I find it unfair that this question was asked. I've been on the Planning Commission for 5.5 years here in town. Prior to that, I was on the Environmental Committee for a year. I, like the gentleman to my right, tried and failed numerous times to get on those committees and those commissions, and finally was awarded those positions. They are appointed by City Council. Once on the Planning Commission 5.5 years ago, I've sat on the R1 subcommittee, the Centennial subcommittee, the Downtown subcommittee, Superintendent's Roundtable, and the Ed Foundation Business Council. What I can tell you is that I'm not alone on any of those committees. There are many individuals within this community that volunteer their time and their efforts. And just because I've been on the Planning Commission for 5.5 years and have that experience, it doesn't make me special. It just makes me one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We are going to let Mr. Giroux start by answering this student question. This is a good one.
Oh, great.
What impact do you hope to have on El Segundo and all of its residents? 60 seconds.
Is that yours, Pilquist? The impact on El Segundo and all its residents, I would look at it this way. The city of El Segundo has an identity, and that identity is that we are a sum of our parts. From, as I mentioned before, from the kids to the seniors to everybody in the middle, the school district, we are all part of, as far as, and also as well as the city employees and public services, it's all part of the same thing. And we need to be able to come together, advocate on our own behalf, and make sure that we have a strong future going forward. So what I hope to do to impact that is to ensure that we have consistent and strong revenue streams continue to come back into the city from a business development aspect of it, to enhance our emergency services and make sure that we are safe as a community, and make sure that we are advocating on behalf of our schools in every way that we can. Thank you.
Ms. Barden.
So it's very important to me that to have a strong network and strong community, and we have that right here. We need to continue to have that. So we need to ensure that we have our businesses and we have our residents support those businesses and not look outside other cities to support other businesses there. So if we can look to see what our needs are in this city and make sure that we have all of that so we can stay here. Also, the morale is really important. You need to appreciate your employees. When you appreciate your employees, they work harder because they want to, because they have passion. And that is a snowball effect. It starts with the workers, it starts with the students, it starts with the teachers. And you can tell when a community is prospering. Also, neighborhood watch is really important. So we need to make sure to have our neighborhood watch. Our public safety is really important. When we work together with them, we have a really tight community. And also incorporating technology and making sure that we're standing with the standards of every other city. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Nickel?
I thought about this. I thought, what's it going to be like to get a question from a fifth grader, and how should we answer it? Should we answer it to all of you, or should we answer it to them? And I think because the question came from them, we should answer it to them. So what impact should we as council people have on our community? I truly believe that our impact should be felt by bringing us all together, by including all of you in everything that we do. Having you here today is very important. Having you see what it takes to stand before your community and be brave and want to lead. There are leaders amongst you. You know who they are. They're the captains of your team. They're the line leaders. Those are the people. Don't try to cut them down. Support them. Make them be part of your community. Encourage them to continue to lead, because leaders are what we have little of this day and age. Thank you for the question.
And Mr. Pimentel?
I think that the ideal impact of any city council that has a city that works is to preserve and amplify the things that make it special. And if there's challenges that have to be overcome, you want a seamless preservation of what you have. You know, there are things that are hallmarks when we describe why we live in El Segundo, whether it's the schools or the safety or interactive people that can get involved. You know, you could send your children to school on a bike and know that the police will be there in minutes if there's an issue. There's things that make this town special. And if there are challenges to be faced by a city council, whether it's pensions or financing or identify revenue streams, you want the impacts of those to be felt on the periphery and not to jeopardize those key cultural touchstones that make us work. So the impact that I would like to have is to preserve what we have now, and if there's tough challenges to be had, we want to minimize the impacts on the key elements that make the city special.
All right, thank you. All right, our next question will begin with Ms. Barden. And I think this one will be interesting to the students as well, but it was not submitted by a student. The question is, what historical figure do you most look up to and why?
God, there's so many. It's really hard to say. Let me think about this. You guys are tough. I mean, I'm trying to think of the one that has the most relevance, but I mean, historical figure, I could say Christopher Columbus. You've got, okay, I'm choking here. I really am. Present day, historical. Okay, my time is going to be up here. This is very embarrassing. This is very embarrassing.
Okay, that's okay,
I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Martin. If you think of it, you
Yes.
can use it. You can come back to it later in your closing statement. That's all right. All right, we're going to pass to Mr. Nickel.
I don't think it was fair that you got tossed that one first. I should give her extra time afterwards. Historical figure that I would look up to and why. Off the top of my head, I think Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Kennedy. Lincoln was the president during a time that our country was at a great split. There was a wedge in our country, and it was his job to try to remove that wedge. And I couldn't imagine what that was like. I don't envy the job that he had to do, and I do not envy the fact that he lost his life because of it. But really, when I think of role models, my greatest role model was my grandfather. He was a product of the Depression, grew up in New York, was children of an immigrant, manifest destiny, came west, set up shop in California, and here I am. And he always said, Scott, if you work hard, nothing else will ever matter. Thank you.
Mr. Pimentel.
So there have been about 7 billion people who have been alive at one point on the planet, so it's a little bit tricky. We all have our bit of people. I love James K. Polk. I will not bore you with why. I think the relevance here is, I would say John D. Rockefeller has tremendous resonance to the town, right? When you think of what ethos do we look for people who make a town great, look to your left and see Standard Oil, right? This is a man who understood he had a particular talent that was germane to his time, right? Sometimes your talent has to line up with your period in history. His talent for not just building a business, but aggregating a business and buying up other petroleum refiners and coming out west, right, led him to fill, the chevron of the Standard Oil that we have before us. His largesse, the amount of money he made, he understood the fickle nature of capital and has given away more money incalculably than we could ever perceive. Imagine someone 5 times richer than Mark Zuckerberg, right? Buying 396 million square miles of property and donating it. It's incredible.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Drew.
I would actually say MLK, Martin Luther King. Scott had mentioned it, didn't go off on it, so I had a chance to kind of say it. And for this particular reason, I cannot think of a person who was more the epitome of what a leader is in history, or one of the greatest in history. To stand up for and go after something that everyone in the world is telling you that you cannot do. And to be willing to put yourself out there and ultimately sacrifice your life for it is a powerful thing beyond all measure. So I would have to say that is the person I admire, and those are the reasons why. And when you're looking for someone to look up to, look for the people that try to go against are things that they're telling you that they cannot do. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, candidates. We know you're running for city council and not school board, but being that we're here today, we do have some questions that involve the city's relationship with the schools and your perspective on the schools. So, Mr. Nickel, we're going to start with you on this question. An approximately $90 million bond is being discussed to pay for El Segundo school upgrades. Would you vote for it? Why or why not? 60 seconds for Mr. Nickel to begin.
I thought voting was confidential.
This is your perspective, I believe. It's being asked.
I'm kidding.
Answer as you wish.
The question was very direct. Would I vote for it, yes or no? I am in support of the school bond. I was lucky enough to sit on the superintendent's roundtable and discuss the preparation of this school bond and going out and understanding what it pays for. And to really understand why we have the need for it, you have to understand how the school gets their money, where their money comes from. It's different than the city. We're lucky. We have plenty of dials that we can turn in different tax revenues that come in. The schools, I do not envy your position as a school board. I do not envy your position as a superintendent. Understand that Emily Lane made this statement to me, and I'm just going to quote you. She said, "Am I supposed to tell the students that, sorry, it's the wrong time? We need it now. Our schools need it. Our schools are one of the 3 foundation principles of our city." Vote yes on the school bond in November.
Mr. Pimentel?
There's no question that a significant part of the allure of El Segundo and the way we live are quality schools. And I think that any school board that's looking to raise revenue to that end has a significant challenge. And the first is that education piece of making sure people, it's easy for us when you have kids. I mean, all of us in this room are associated with PTAs, know how revenue comes into schools, but making clear to voters writ large about what the revenue stream looks like and why school bonds are important is key. I mean, we had Measure Q fail 10 years ago, but it failed on its merits, right? People understood what that bond was for exactly. You need to make explicit when you educate voters where your money comes from, why you are not getting it, and what the capital improvements you're going to use the bond for. When you make that clear, it becomes a bit self-evident to people of why we need to improve and where those will go. So my personal thing, I obviously am biased. I have 3 children in school and they'll be in school for a long time. So the capital improvements we get from a bond issue, for me, are second nature. I would rather have that than be forced to look at a parcel tax like some of our neighboring communities are.
As Scott mentioned, if you look at the 2 different budgets, the school budget's about $30 million. The city's general fund is about $70 million. So it's difficult to kind of compare apples to apples on that. So my answer in short is yes, I'm in favor of the bond measure. And for many reasons, but one of the big things is that it's something that's directed particularly to the schools. So I'm not a big tax guy. I don't like looking at my W-2s and all that and seeing things taken out. But if I know that at least it's directed towards my community in the schools that my children go to, then I'm all in favor of that. The other thing to look at is there's competition now. Wiseburn School District has a lot going on. They built a big, shiny new high school that everybody's seen. Make no mistake, that is the new standard. We want to be able to put our children in a position to be able to compete, and I think this bond will help that out. Thank you.
Ms. Barden?
I'm all in favor of the bond. I think it's really important. What we see come out of the schools and our children and the culture and the education is a direct reflection of our community and the value of our homes here and the city in general. I did tour the Wiseburn High School the other day. I know that there's a lot of competition. I think that you're in a great place. I think this is a beautiful school here, so whatever you choose to go to will be up to you and your parents. But let it be known that there is competition out there, and we need to have the tools in this area, in these schools, public schools here in El Segundo, to be able to compete with the other communities that are coming about. So I'm definitely in favor of the bond.
Okay. Thank you, candidates. All right, we are jumping back to the front of the table here, if I'm correct, with Mr. Pimentel. The next question is, how should the city work together with the school district and the police department to maximize campus safety?
And that relationship is an important and obvious one where when you talk about any kind of safety measure, and I will put my professional experience hat on, so I don't want to get a bit too wonky of this, but there is a protective piece that comes in, and that's what the school owns, right? The physical infrastructure is the protective piece of any kind of risk management profile. And the city is the reactive piece. So the school owns access control. It constrains moments of risk to it. So if we think the highest risk issue to a school is someone coming into it, well, if the school has access control and says you can only come in the morning or leave in the afternoon, then the city knows where those elevated risk windows are. And what does the city do? What's the reactive piece? So you saw a policeman out front today when kids come to school. Well, you can post a policeman between here and the middle school. You can do it between Richmond and the high school. And it is an important partnership, and that communication exists. I mean, we have great communication between our school infrastructure and city services, but it is a hand and glove piece of prevention and reaction.
I think when we all look at this together, it comes down to funding. We know that there are needs. One thing is you've seen Officer Black outside. we need more officer blacks. That's one of the first things I think we need to have to make sure that we're securing that. I think when they're visible, it is a deterrent. The other thing I really wanted to get into, though, is the education process. I think that we have to look also more into that piece of it. How can we identify issues up front, educating our own educators, educating our students about things to look for, and then how to actually treat the individuals that may be having issues or may be having concerns. I think so. It's a two-pronged process. I think all three need to work together and advocate for each other. But in the end, it doesn't only have to be or necessarily have to be all about the visible safety. I also believe very strongly that it has to be about the education part of it as well. Thank you.
You look at some of the newer schools now, and they're actually constructing them that the kids are inside at all times. They are not out playing. Their doors are locked. Nobody can enter them unless they go to a front door and get a pass. The charm of this school is the fact that it is open, and you're able to walk from class to class, and you can be in the fresh air. We need to make sure that our public safety is around us, and that you're correct, Lance, that you are trained in the areas. If you see anything that doesn't look right to you, that you do mention it and you go to a teacher. And that's really important. But the charm of having the ability to have an open school format as this is really important. Thank you.
Understanding the relationship city council to school board. This is a school board thing. It's going to come from them. Direction's going to come from them. Support can come from us on the city level. Recently on the school board meeting on the 13th, they voted to contract Actus security consultant. They're going to come across all of our campuses and not just look to how to secure the campuses. They're also going to provide training. I truly believe, in talking to members of the staff at both this school and the middle school, the staff knows the students. The staff knows the people coming and going from this campus. The staff knows us that are doing the pickups and the drop-offs. I think it's really important that the training piece is emphasized at the schools, because if we train the people who are here all the time, they know when something is not right, and they can say something, and then they'll have the skills based upon the training on what to do about it. So I think it starts with the training, and we as city council people can support the school.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to move into a variety of issues, policy, community-related issues. So the first question, we're going to start with Mr. Giroux. And the question is, how should El Segundo balance its fiscal limitations with its need to attract and retain public safety officers?
All right, I think we're talking about pensions here, are we not?
Interpret as you wish.
Okay, I think we have to kind of, I'm gonna take it as a pension question because I think that's what it is. I think when I talk, first of all, that's gonna take about 60 minutes, not 60 seconds to talk about that. But I'm gonna kind of separate them out in two boxes for you. First, you have the unfunded pension liabilities, which we've all heard about as being a daunting thing. In the end, that is something that is on retirees. It's there. It's negotiated, it's contracted. Every city that has CalPERS in the state of California is facing that. What I'd like to shift it to, though, is the fact that on a local level, what we can do and what we negotiate with the unions is based upon three things: your salaries, non-pensionable benefits, and contribution levels. So we need to make sure that through this process that we are maintaining our levels of public safety while also addressing the fiscal and being fiscally responsible as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Barden?
Our city council actually has helped to pay down the pensions. They've done a refi, went for a 30-year loan to a 20-year loan. They're doing as much as they can. We're all in this together. We're not just this city. Every city is going through this. I work at UCLA. I'm having to pay for a lot of people that are retiring soon. So it's just the way that it is. What are we going to do about it in the future? We need to generate revenue. We can find ways of generating revenue. We can go to a tier system, which I believe we're doing now. Anybody that's hired on, their pensions are not quite the same. So we have to look forward. We can't be negative. Just look to the future, see what we can do, and do our best and generate revenue for our city. Thank you.
Tracy, can you read the question again real quick?
Yes, the question is, how should El Segundo balance its fiscal limitations with its need to attract and retain public safety officers?
Thank you. So attracting and retaining public safety officers, this is something that we hear a lot about as residents, and I hope you kids are hearing this too. It's difficult. It's really hard in our city today. There's certain fundamental changes that happened with regards to the pay structure at the police department as well as the pensions. What I can tell you this is that recently at an ad hoc meeting that involved all employee union members and city council, we are 69% funded on our unfunded liability, and it was stated by a consultant that most healthy cities are funded between 70 to 85%. So we're funded to 69%, so the sky may not be falling as much as it's painted to us, but understand this, retaining officers, hiring new officers, if we lose our safety component in this city, we lose one of the fundamental things that makes us who we are and our identity. So we as council members need to support retention and new hiring. Thank you.
Okay. Back to you, Mr. Pimentel.
With the who's your favorite person in history, we tend to try and reach back and look to see if there's lessons from someone who lived a long time ago that we can apply to the present. And the nice thing about these questions about fiscal discipline and how services work are we live in that time period now. For 10 years after the recession, we've seen cities that try to run themselves like a family business attempt to cut their way to structural balance in their budget. And if you constrain services and make decisions based on austerity principle, as a city, you lose people. And we can see that whether it's Athens, whether it's Vallejo, whether it's the time Mammoth Lakes, whether it's Tupelo, Mississippi. These are all places that have tried to cut themselves to the bone to solve what they thought was a fiscal limitation. The issue is growth, right? If you want to fund services, and services are without question what makes this city, what binds together the elements of the people and business that lets our city be the city that it is, we need to attach revenue streams to it and build our business sector to fund those so we don't have those limitations.
All right. Thank you, candidates. The next question will begin with Ms. Barden. The question is, do you believe El Segundo serves residents of all ages and income levels well? Where do you see greatness and where do you see room for improvement and how?
This is a very unique city, and the answer is yes, I do, to a point. We serve our seniors here very well, from what I understand. I know there's a lot of senior programs and facilities that need to be upgraded, which I'm sure will. And our youth programs here are absolutely amazing and remarkable. I can't say enough about the youth programs here. What we may not have is for affordable housing, low-income housing in the city. And if that's something that the county is putting pressure on the city, that will have to be maybe looked at. But as it stands right now, our community, I don't believe in having residents east of Sepulveda. I think we can do much more with our community here and grow and prosper and generate revenue here and look for more senior housing as opposed to any affordable housing. Thank you.
I believe our city does a wonderful job serving all age groups, all demographics within our city. What you have to understand is it's a constant balancing act. If we pay too much attention to the seniors, then we're not paying enough attention to most of you in the room who have little children. And if we pay too much attention to both of those groups, then you got that middle group that is like, hey, I'm a young adult professional that lives in town. What are you doing for me? When you look around town, you think of our services, Parks and Rec, safety, public works, infrastructure. Our city is doing a very good job. Is there room for improvement? Sure. But it requires us. It requires our involvement. It requires people volunteering on the various committees in town so we can continue to evolve, continue to stay on the cutting edge. We recently grew an arts and culture committee because it's important to grow the arts here in town. Little things like that are what are going to keep sharpening our pencil and keeping us wonderful. Thank you.
Back to you, Mr. Pimentel.
I will stay on the historical themes that I'm suddenly gravitating to here. You know, with the Martin Luther King piece, I think is resonant here because this is, I think, a city where we do judge people by the content of their character. And we attract people based on their characteristics of involvement, of self-reliance, of integrity, of responsibility. That's why we're all here, right? We lament our turnout in voter elections, but half of us are registered voters. I mean, it's an incredible number of eligible voters that take the time at least to register, even if they don't turn out. So the services we provide, the people we attract, are character things, and we do an excellent job with it. We reach across to seniors and provide services that other cities would be desperate for. Our involvement in schools, the fact that you can talk about a bond measure and everyone will nod their head and know what you're talking about, even if they're angry about you with, speaks to how invested we are in our children. So when we talk about the things of do we serve people? Of course we do. I mean, that's why we're here. Now, are there risks that lurk out there? I think the cost of housing here is a real risk to the way we live and our ability to bring those sorts of people in, and how we build capacity and make room for them is something a city council needs to be alert for.
I think we do a tremendous job with services to the city. If you think about it, you can take your child to dance, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, and swimming and not drive more than about 1.5 miles. All right, we have a lot of great services at good prices, and I think that's a big part of the community here. We don't pay for trash. We have low taxes. I think those parts of it are very, very good. The one part I'd like to see improve, though, is the transparency. I think it's very difficult for all of us to actually find information on the things that we're talking about up here right now. It should be more transparent so that we can all become a little bit more educated about what's going on, what the decisions are that need to be made, and how they're supposed to be made. And I think that's one big improvement that we can make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, candidates. Our next question will start with Mr. Nickel, and the question is, are you in favor of more affordable housing in El Segundo, especially multifamily condos and townhomes to cater to the elderly, young professionals and families?
First off, more housing? Sure. Higher density of housing in what we call a community? It's a slippery slope. It's a very slippery slope. We didn't buy in North Redondo where there's 2 and 3 units per lot. We bought in a single family resident zone. Now, some of us live in townhouses, some of us live in condos. Going to school here in high school, some of my best friends lived in apartments. They still lived in town. It was a wonderful thing. The concept of affordable housing, I have trouble with this because understand that housing, it's simple economics. And anybody who took an economics class in high school knows it's supply and demand. They're not making more land in El Segundo. I repeat, they're not making more land in El Segundo. More housing, more people, more traffic, it's a very slippery slope. Our identity is the most important thing to us. And so as much as I feel for those who need more housing, I think that this is a community issue that we just have to be very, very careful and tread lightly on. Thank you.
I will echo some of that with, I'm not sure if the questioner, we tend to, do we mean little a affordable or big A affordable? The big A affordable as a legal term based on the Housing and Urban Development's adjusted median income is a different conversation, right? Which involves building units that go at $1,200 for an apartment and has mandated infrastructural pieces. I don't think what we're talking about is that. I think what we're talking about is housing capacity and housing attainability. So when I talk in the last issue about how we allow people to come into our city, how young professionals have an opportunity to enter it, are there opportunities for extra capacity? There's some spare capacity around the edges. They're not certainly building more land in the city, right? We're not going to build a giant pier to put housing on. But are there areas that we could have mixed use allotments for that might be able to add apartment or condo space for people to enter the market west of Sepulveda in our current residential zones? I think there's room and appetite for that if we look at the way we build those zones, particularly in some parts of Smoky Hollow along Franklin. Thanks.
As Scott mentioned, it's a slippery slope when you talk about affordable housing, but the way I'm going to attack this is the question is, why is it so expensive to live in El Segundo? And it's simply a supply and demand. People want to come here because of what it is that we have here. And as a result, that's driving up your values. I don't think that's a bad thing. Also, this is a city that you achieve to. You need to be able to afford to live here, to work hard to live here, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I would also argue a little bit against the common theme that young families aren't making their way into El Segundo. I'm the president of the Little League. I have 406 families. All of them are 12 years old and younger. 280 plus of those are ages 8 years and younger. They're finding their way in. It's just a different dynamic than it used to be. It's 2 incomes now, maybe, instead of 1. So I think it's something that we need to be very careful of about how we progress with that. Thank you.
My daughter is graduating in May with an urban planning degree, and she was the first one that told me, because I asked her about affordable housing. And she said affordable housing is for those that make a little over 50,000 or less. And I don't understand how, in a city like El Segundo in the South Bay, how even the property, we can make anything for somebody with that income. Another thing I'm a little worried about affordable housing is the construction of affordable housing. Why is it affordable? Why is it in the same property as somebody else, but their value is more than affordable housing? That just tells me maybe the construction that they're using isn't sound. They're not using the right material, and that concerns me. So I am all in favor of some form of affordable housing for seniors that we can do, because maybe that, well, I'm in favor of affordable housing for seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. We are going to shift back to the top of the table here. Mr. Pimentel will start our next question. Question is, are you aware that the Recreation and Parks Board is made up of 5 men, even though highly qualified moms have applied for a position? This is not for you to answer. How can we ensure diversity?
Well, as I noted before, being routinely turned down for memberships through committees is a particularly sore point for me. I have a letter in hand that says, thank you for continuing to try. So I can't necessarily speak to exactly how someone gets excluded or included. And I will say that whenever we convene people for parks or for any board that contributes, I think as people who get involved, we tend to apply for 2 things. Am I a subject matter expert, or am I personally invested? And I think that if there is an implicit bias involved, or sometimes just a bias of we want experts, and don't necessarily look at user involvement, those things can get distorted. Now, I don't know the criteria by which people are being added or turned down. But I think certainly you want a diversity of thought, opinion, and oftentimes that takes place in diversity of gender or background. That's what we'd want on that, but I don't certainly have the details of why someone gets excluded. I thought I would have been a good member, but maybe they don't like bald. I don't know.
I can speak to my experience on the Little League board. When I first joined that board 5 years ago, there's 18 members, by the way, and I think there was 1 or 2 females on that board. Fast forward 5 years from now, I think we have 8 out of the 18. Actually, maybe even 9. I think we almost be at 50% at this point in time. I can tell you it's a really good idea to do that because moms get stuff done. And they always, I'd say always act in the best interest of the children and not necessarily just their child. So while I don't have a reason why Parks and Rec has done that, I think it would be a really good idea based on experience to diversify that board a little bit. Thank you.
Do you mind reading the question
Absolutely.
again? Okay.
The question is, are you aware that the Recreation and Parks Board is made up of 5 men, even though highly qualified moms have applied for a position? How can we ensure diversity?
How can we? I mean, I see diversity everywhere now, and I'm happy to see that we have evolved. I strongly believe in actually hiring the best candidate for the job. We've gone, the Weisburn School, when I walk in those science classes, I mean, there are over 50% that are women in those science classes, in the engineering classes. We've done this already. We need to just hire the right person for the job. How can we, just because there's more men on that board, they're probably competent in their job. So I think we need to start a new trend and look for the right person for the job. Thank you.
Mr. Nickel?
How to ensure diversity moving forward? Well, you asked the question here where 2 of the 4 of us will be on council the next time a seat comes up on the Parks and Rec Commission, and we'll be the ones helping doing those interviews, so I'm sure it's going to echo in our ears that there's more diversity needed on those panels. I will tell you this, 2 women that I know that served on the Parks and Rec Commission for many years. Margie Randall was on the Parks and Rec Commission for 12 years. That's 3 terms. And Debbie Bundy was there for 2 terms, 8 years. So it's not unheard of. They're there. On the Planning Commission currently, you have 2 women. And on City Council currently, you have 2 women. So there is plenty of diversity across the board. It's just a matter of getting involved, keeping your name out there, meet people, build the relationships. The relationships are ultimately what will see you finding a seat in a decision-making place. Thank you for your involvement.
Okay. The next question will begin with Mr. Giroux. The question is, what should City Council do to deal with the increasing homeless presence in El Segundo?
Wow. I would say this, when we say increasing homeless, yes, there is definitely more than there used to be. However, I think the issue really is that El Segundo is not built to actually be able to rehabilitate or help these individuals that are here. That is the genesis of it. It's not a matter of whether or not you have empathy for those people. The problem is they cannot necessarily get help here. There are places, there are programs, there's Measure H if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong on that, where there are programs now to be able to help get those people what they need, whether it be from a medical standpoint, whether it be from just a help standpoint to get started again, work, etc. So I think what we need to do is be able to help those people get to the point or to the places that they need in order to be able to help themselves out. Thank you.
Orange County actually gave 400 motel vouchers to the homeless people, and they're giving them 30 days in a motel free of charge, also including food. Trying to help those families, some of those single women with kids, trying to get them on their feet, at least have shelter, maybe they can go out and look for a job. It'll be really interesting to see how that goes. But as far as El Segundo, we have to think of our security first. And if we don't feel safe, there are organizations for these people. There are plenty of organizations for the homeless. They don't know about them. They need to be taught. I will be the first person, if I could start any movement, if it isn't there already, to help these people get help where they need to be, but they don't need to be in El Segundo.
Homeless presence in El Segundo, it's a slippery slope, as I've said before. I had a great conversation with Officer Lemus this morning in regards to what our police department can and what they are doing about the homeless people that live in our town. One, you got to understand it's an outreach thing. These people are not breaking any laws. It is not against the law for them to sit there with their items and sleep on a bench. There is no law being broken. It's technically not loitering. There are programs within the county that our men and women at the police department are utilizing. Recently, they had a representative from the LA County Board of Health come out and do a ride-along. And they went and they introduced themselves and spoke to each and every homeless person that's in this town. And what they were working on is trying to identify if these people wanted help. Many of them do. Some of them are scared to go to shelters. They don't want shelters. But what our officers have done, they've visited these shelters, and now they've come back and expressed how can I say this, experience with these shelters to the homeless people, and they're helping them. They're trying to relocate them at a time.
Go ahead, Mr. Pimentel.
With homelessness or transients in general, where we have a quality of life and safety issue, which we balance against our human sensibility of empathy. I think very intelligently, because homelessness and homeless services are generally a county issue, the cities in the South Bay have banded together in a South Bay regional task force about homelessness, right? So we have a head count. We know there's about, give or take, 41 or 4,200 homeless people that percolate around. And with that, we can attach some of the Measure H funding, which we all voted for in 2016, the Measure H funding to apply against those services. So our front line of dealing with homeless is police, because that's what we have. Measure H funding funds both training for them and one particular officer's salary. So we have people who are on staff who can help make a determine with context to homeless of, look, is this someone that needs to go to Marina Del Rey for psychiatric hold, or is this someone that needs to be applied for advanced or emergency homelessness services with a motel voucher? It usually takes about 4 to 5 contacts with an individual before you get an answer of yes or no they will take services. But we have people who are trained for it, and we all paid to fund it. So it's kind of a win for us.
Okay. Thank you, candidates. The next question, and goodbye, 5th grade. The next question is actually a student question, so we'll have them watch at home later. Sorry, I know you have to get back to actual school stuff in your classrooms, but we'll tell you how this goes. So this is a student question, and it's going to start with Ms. Barden. The question is, what environmental challenges is El Segundo facing, and what can we do about them?
Well, our challenges, of course, we know that we live next to an airport, a Hyperion, and Chevron. We have a lot of environmental concerns here. We have to make sure that we're safe. We have to make sure that our air quality is safe. It needs to be checked all the time. We have to look into the future. We need a budget for some environmental future things that might be mandated in the future that is out of our control. And we don't want to be left behind. Other cities are already doing this. Other countries have already done this. We have to always look to the future. So for now, our environmental challenges are definitely what surround us is our air quality. And like I said, that needs to be monitored on a continuous basis. Thank you.
It's too bad the kids aren't here, so we can't answer this to them, but what environmental challenges are we facing? When I look at the city, I see a lot of inconsistency. We all have a recycle bin if we want a recycle bin at home, but if you live in a townhouse complex and your townhome HOA has to pay for trash, you don't necessarily have a recycle bin. Inconsistency. Here at this school, I know they've implemented a 3-bin system: food waste, recycling, and trash. It's really important that I believe we're consistent across the board, that everywhere our kids turn, everywhere we turn, it's all the same. It's echoing the same message so we can create a new habit. I'm a big believer that we need to look at trash and how we are disposing of it, because that's just not a city facility thing. That's a resident thing. That's across the board. And if we really want to make a difference in this world, we can do it together. We're not going to do it as a city or as residents, but rather together. Thank you.
With environmental issues, there's immediate things that we need to be prepared for, concerned with, and things down the road as well. Immediately, we think of airplanes and refineries and things that put volatile organics into the air that we breathe, and those are immediate concerns. How do we fund at the fire department? We have two CUPA officers who deal exclusively with monitoring what happens with the environmental impacts of our resident businesses. We have AQMD issues that we need to make sure are tracking and accurately tracking both the refinery and the airport. Those are immediate things, and those are things that the city has a degree of influence on, but doesn't over. CUPA filters up to the city. AQMD is a county issue. Those aren't things that we necessarily can touch. I think our risk for the long term are what are second order effects of the way that the environmental industry changes things. What do we look like, and I said this last time, what do we look like if Chevron becomes an energy company and not an oil company? If that refinery stops refining, what does the character of this town become if we move to a different industry? What does this town look like if water rights are constrained coming downriver from the California aqueduct? That will change the way that we live.
I think we look at, obviously, what we have existing here between what we just mentioned, the airport, Scattergood, Hyperion, Chevron. We have committees that, and we do have communication with these committees, and we really have to continue to reevaluate our working relationships with these companies, you know, as best we can as a city. The future problem you're looking at, we mentioned once before, is a possibility of a desal plant. That there's a lot of potential environmental impacts of a desalination plant that we have to look at, and that's something that we can actually effect right now based on what our decisions are on that. Overall, though, reducing our carbon footprint is important. Recycling, water conservation, composting, things that we do on a consistent basis. And actually, I'm going to echo Scott's comment on that, is that I do think that we actually maybe have to start looking at an actual plan that is consistent across the board so that we'll all know exactly what needs to be done and then what the effects of that are. Thank you.
Right, our next question will start with Mr. Nickel. The question is, what is your perspective on the relationship between El Segundo and Los Angeles World Airports?
Wonderful relationship. They're our neighbor to the north, if you didn't know. Currently, Mayor Pro Tem Drew Boyles and community leader Dick Croxall are on the board of airports committee. Understand this, LA makes a lot of money next door to us. They are well over their saturated point, or their MAP, million annual passenger point. They're over by about 6 million passengers a year currently, and they're looking to push that to another 5 million passengers. Planes will never stop taking off next to us, understand that. What can we do? We can fight for us, the citizens. We can fight for the people. We can work with LAWA, or the board of commission over there for the airport. We can work with them on, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to do to help us deal with this impact? Because you're not going to stop taking off planes. You're going to continue to do it. You're going to do it more. And what's in it for us? So it's just a matter of fighting for our rights within that community.
I'm sorry.
Good. It comes back here. Sorry, Mr. Pimentel.
I'll let you take this one first if you like. We will lose a lot of our arguments with LAWA, and it's a matter of imbalanced incentive, in which their incentives to generate revenue based on passengers taking off will override and entice county commissioners and state legislators to rule in their favor. I mean, and technology is on their side, right? The advances that we've made in avionics and the way we control planes allow them to cram far more aircraft into a constrained amount of time than they ever have before, right? And advances in that will continue to make it so. So our arguments against them are constrained to a degree on their incentives. But there's a positive but on this. That is, the FAA runs the safety piece, and the FAA does not have incentives to generate revenue out of that airport. So when we engage at the federal level and say that your rate at which you're putting aircraft through are fundamentally unsafe, and they're fundamentally causing aircraft to fly over our city, and they're fundamentally causing issues with sound that increase the decibel level per overfly by up to 30 decibels, those are issues that we have alliances with other airports and other cities that we could forge on a federal level.
LAX is the 4th busiest airport in the world, not just the United States. Okay, that is a big number. We're probably facing about 100 million air passengers over the next few years total. Any other airport that has that kind of air passenger density is about 3 to 4 times the size of LAX. So here's the thing, our neighbor is not going anywhere. We have to continue to engage with them. It's one of those things that you have to continue to bang your head against the wall. Part of it is kind of what Chris just said. You gotta be loud, you gotta complain, you have to make your voices heard. Go on the unsafe aspect of things and generate your arguments that way. I think it's also going to be very important to form a coalition of the smaller cities around that are affected the same way as we are, to have a bigger voice going forward, because we're fighting against Westchester to the north of us, who is much bigger and much better funded. Thank you.
I've talked to our residents about this on Acacia and some streets near LAX, and they've noticed that the sound has even increased. So even with the residential soundproofing, there's more planes still going overhead. Also, Imperial needs to be completely cleaned up. If you go over on the Westchester side, everything's neat and it's clean, it's inviting. When you come into El Segundo on Imperial, it is a mess. The signs are broken, the landscaping is terrible, and the roads need some help. They need to work with us. I did talk to a resident, and they said, you have to be very strong with them. Apparently, back in the day, they did put a sign up, said that LAX is unsafe, and that's really got their attention. It sounds like this is a company that you really have to do some strong holding with, but we need them to be accountable, and we need them to pay for every time they fly their aircraft over here. And if I can arrange some type of group, I will make sure to collect those fees.
Thank you, candidates. In the interest of time, we are going to jump to one final question and then let you have your closing statements. So we are going to go back to the head of the table for this last question. And we'll start with Mr. Pimentel. The question is, you all have busy, full lives. What is going to give in your life to take on this job? How will you balance it all? Mr. Pimentel.
I'd like to invite my wife to the stage to answer that question. No, there's a bit of a truism out there that the busier you are, the more efficient you can be. I think that with a lot of us, we are already loaded to the gills with our involvement. I mean, Lance and I sit on Little League. I run into Scott coaching all the time, right? Whether it's Eagle Nest boards or PTAs or fall festivals or runs for education or all the things that all of us are involved in, we make time for things that we think are important, right? And we balance our work for employment, our work at home, right, and our private lives in order to make the things that we value occur. Sometimes we have a ton of help with a master scheduler. I certainly live with one who keeps me rigorously on target, but what is important is what we make time for. And we are all involved already, and I do not see that there's really any conflict with with changing that involvement to something that involves the City Council.
It's a great question. I kind of have to echo a lot of what Chris just talked about. But I will tell you that I've learned that I had a lot of downtime before that I didn't realize I had. And you can be very, very efficient. Well, it wasn't supposed to be downtime. It just happened to be downtime. But you can get things done that you want to get done. And I'm also at the point now. My son actually ages out of Little League this year, so I will not be on that board going forward. It's time for somebody else to take that over. By the way, we have 7 spots coming up. Anybody out there? So I think it's important. Also, I work locally. I'm 3/4 of a mile from here, so I've been able to take my work life and be able to be at a position right now where I'm able to give the time to do this. And I want to do this while I still have skin in the game. I have 2 young children. I'm a professional in town, fully employed. It's going to be important for going forward for people to get involved while they still have some skin in the game. So thank you very much.
I am an empty nester, and it's been very interesting. If you're a mother that's been with your children every single day of their lives, and then they go off to college, it's quite a change. But I've always been working, and I've always been volunteering, and I have the time to really concentrate on the things that I really value, and I really value this time and this city. Thank you.
Thank you.
We all have busy lives. We're all busy, but yet you're all here. Let's not forget that. So we can find the time. I'm lucky enough to call myself my own boss, which means I make my own schedule, which means I am only slave to myself. I do not have to answer to anyone except Kimberly Nickel and maybe Sullivan and Scotty sometimes. I also work in town. Working in town enables me to, at the drop of a hat, when someone calls, yeah, I can come over right now. Not a problem. My career choice was one that was made because I knew in a short period of time I could make the money I needed to support my family and also enable me the ability to coach my children in sports. Very, very important to me. Being involved in my community, very important to me. Volunteer on different boards, which is something, as Lance said, I liked it. He has still has skin in the game, and it makes perfect sense. We all care about this town, and it's up to us to step up, volunteer, and be stewards to our town. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, we're going to move into our closing statements. Each candidate will have 90 seconds, and we're going to start from the reverse end of the table that we started with this morning. So Mr. Nickel will begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Long time no talk. My candidacy is rooted in a desire to serve you, the citizens of El Segundo. We, the people, we are what make her so special, and yet we all see this town through a different lens. I am very lucky to say that I have seen this town through many different lenses. The lenses of a child, the lens of a student, the lens of a young adult, a maturing adult, a volunteer, a businessman, a parent, and a planning commissioner. Actions speak louder than words. I have a public record of being a citizen advocate. The life Kimberly, my wife, and I have chosen to live, it's one that's filled with giving back to our town and our community and the people we love so dearly. The knowledge I've amassed in my time here in El Segundo is invaluable, and it makes me uniquely qualified to serve the people of El Segundo. El Segundo, it's not your town. It's not your town. It's definitely not my town. This is our town, and our town needs to be seen in our image. I'll leave you with this quote. The go-giver, Bob Berg. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Thank you. Vote on April 10th.
Since I've gone through the whole educational system here in El Segundo and brought up my children, I feel very blessed that they're doing very well. They also worked for the city themselves. Probably my best quality is listening, and I'm an action person. I get things done. I always have. And my biggest importance here is I want to listen and see what your concerns are, and I've listened to you, and I want to resolve those, and I will be able to do that. Of course, I mentioned that my first priority is safety, and need to ensure that the children, the seniors, the whole community here is safe. We do know that our public safety needs more staff, and we're working on getting that. As you can see in other cities, if anything happens like in Florida, it sure puts a damper on the reputation for the city, so we cannot have that happen. El Segundo is the most prosperous city around, and I value this town, and I will want to work for you to make it and stay as good as it is right now. Thank you.
In my opening statement, I talked a little bit about my family and as far as my volunteer work, but I want to talk a little bit also about my background. So I have a degree in economics from Boston College. I also have an MBA that I earned while working full-time for a Fortune 500 company, Procter & Gamble. From there, I went international and worked for in China and in Mexico for a total of 3 years in the footwear manufacturing industry. And in the past 20 years, I've been working for family-owned entrepreneurial companies. I mention those things because that experience was invaluable, both as a businessman and also as an individual, to be able to work in those diverse environments with diverse people and diverse cultures. Combining that with what I've done as far as the community goes, it brings a very unique set of skills to the table and a unique set of experiences for me to draw upon as your representative on council. In the end, my job is going to be to act in our best interests, not my own, but for all of us. And that's a very important distinction to make. So I'm going to leave you with two different things right now. Number one is integrity. Integrity is the only thing that people can't take from you. You can give it away, but you can't have them take it. I will maintain my integrity throughout this process. The second part is transparency. You may not always agree with the decisions I will be making, but I will make sure that you understand the methodology that I use to make those decisions. I look forward to your support on April 10th. Thank you.
I think we will choose as voters, because I'm a voter too, we choose our candidate with whom we're going to select based on two broad categories. Do you like the new idea? Do we have an idea on power lines or pensions or potholes or zoning or the things that city councilmen talk about when we come to your door? But also, do you trust our process? What kind of person are you voting for, and what do they do to draw their conclusions? By disposition, I'm a researcher, right? I listen to you, I grab the data, I do the homework, and I explain why I'm doing it. As a professional, whether it was in the military or working for the government or doing in the private sector, I'm obligated to do those things. My conclusions have to be well-founded, grounded in data and thought, and data doesn't just mean numbers, data means talking to people and communicating why I made that decision. Now, similarly, I cannot guarantee that decision makes everyone happy. I can guarantee you'll see the process, right? And professionally, you will know that that decision that I have made on your behalf and on our behalf is something that's grounded in service to you and grounded in my best intentions for the city and will make the city better. So when I ask for your vote on April 10th or earlier, if you're already mailing it in, and some of you may have it with you, but we can't take it for you, I would ask that you vote on those things. Do I trust this person, their process, their legacy of judgment, and their conviction to work on your behalf? So, thank you.
Okay, with that, we are going to conclude our forum for the candidates today. Those of you in the audience here or at home, we thank you for your time and attention. And if your question was not asked and answered, again, I encourage you to reach out to the candidates directly or watch the previous forum that was also recorded by El Segundo TV. It's now on their YouTube channel. You can also attend the next forum, which is March 29th at 7 p.m. at the El Segundo Women's Club for more perspective on the candidates' positions. Thanks again to the staff of Center Street School and all my fellow PTA volunteers for making today possible, especially April Bucknell, our legislation chair. Thank you, Gwen, for your timing down below. I also want to thank Officer Scott Black and all of our El Segundo police officers that are here to keep an eye on things and make sure people go where they're supposed to and not where they're not supposed to. So thank you so much for your watch and your safety guidance today. To the candidates, we thank you all for supporting and participating in this forum and your willingness to serve our community. We wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.